Hi, it's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is snarl, and this verb was suggested by the viewer Artem. Artem, thank you so much for sharing another great idea. Now, let's take a moment and review some of the definitions or the ways that we could use this verb. The first definition of snarl is more commonly going to be used to describe an action that animals would do, and this would be to make an aggressive growl, showing or baring its teeth. We might hear this used most commonly with dogs, but it could be used with other animals as well. A second way to use the verb snarl is going to be describe an action that people would do, and that's to say something in a rather angry or a bad-tempered way. All right. Again, is not quite like we're growling, but again, kind of similar in that there's this negative energy that's being expressed. A third way the verb snarl gets used can mean to cause to become knotted and intertwined. We'll see some examples of this later, but things like cords, wires, etc. Can become knotted and intertwined. For now, you should know that snarl is a regular verb. If you want to make the progressive form of the verb, all you need to do is add ing, and that forms snarling. The past tense and the participle form of this verb can be made by adding ed. Now our base verb, snarl, ends in a voiced L sound. This means our ed ending is just going to make a D sound, and we're not going to add an extra syllable when we say it. So the past tense and the participle form of the verb should sound like this: snarled, snarled. Now let's move on and talk about a few phrasal verbs that you might encounter with snarl. The first one you might see or hear is to snarl at. This phrasal verb can have a couple meanings. We'll talk about two of them. The first way to use it matches our first definition. Here, we're growling at someone or something else in a vicious manner, baring or showing our teeth. So again, you'll more likely see this used in connection to animals. So the example sentence says, their dog snarls at anyone who gets within 10 feet of their door. So this might be described as kind of an aggressive animal, one who feels quite protective of their space. And so, again, anyone getting close maybe to the house gets this particular action as a result. A second way to use snarl at, again, would be more with people here, so to speak or respond to someone else in a rather nasty or aggressive manner. So, an example of this. He snarled at the person on the other end of the line when he didn't get an immediate answer to his question. Again, this person's kind of communicating some anger, some negative feelings. Another phrasal verb you might encounter is to snarl out. This would be to utter or say something, again, nasty or aggressive. An example of that in a sentence might be, she has been snarling out orders all morning. The last phrasal verb we'll discuss today is to snarl up. It means to become entangled or knotted. So back to that third definition of the verb. An example of this. The fishing line snarled up when you reeled it in too quickly. Right? So if there are any fisher people out watching this video, maybe you've had this particular experience. So you've cast, you're trying to bring it back in, right? And if you go too quickly, right, it can sort of become entangled or knotted. Now, let's move on and do some more verb tense practice. Today, we're going to review the past progressive and the simple present. Let's start with the past progressive. Now, some teachers and textbooks will refer to this as the past continuous, and that's just fine. It means exactly the same thing. When you hear people using this verb tense, what they're doing is describing an action that was ongoing or that was continuing at some point in the past. The reason I like saying past progressive with my students is that two P's can help us remember we need two parts to make our verb. So we'll be using a past form of be, and then we'll be using the ing form of the verb. Now, the be verb is special because we have two forms in the past tense, so we're going to have to pay attention to our subject. If our subject is I, you, we, I've started off the wrong list. I'm out of practice here after my illness. Let me back up here. If our subject is I, he, she, or it, we're going to use was and then the ing form of the verb. But if our subject is you, we, or they, then we'll use were and then the ing form of the verb. Let's look at an example sentence. The dogs were snarling behind the fence as the children played next door. So here we have multiple dogs. So that's like using the subject they. That's why you see were there. We have this ongoing action as another action takes place. Now let's take a look at negative sentences in the past progressive. Again, we must pay attention to our subject. We'll start with the subject, then we'll use either was or were, whichever form matches our subject, then not, and then the ing form of the verb. You might also encounter the contractions wasn't or weren't. I've used one in my example here. Traffic wasn't snarling up because of the accident. It's another frequent way you'll see this particular verb used in connection to traffic jams, congested roadways, kind of that idea that little closer to that third definition, like things are almost knotted up and not progressing or continuing down the roadway. Now let's look at making a yes or no question in the past progressive. To do this, start with was or were. Whatever form matches your subject, that subject comes next. Then use the ing form of the verb. Here's another example. Was the suspect snarling at the detectives when he was questioned? Right? So that might be describing that sort of angry way someone might be speaking to another person. Now, let's move on and talk a little bit about the simple present. We use this verb tense to talk about habits and routines. We also use it to discuss facts. The simple present is another verb tense where we need to pay attention to our subject. If our subject is I, you, we, or they, in the affirmative, we're just going to use the base verb. No suffixes, no special endings. However, if the subject is he, she, or it, we need to add an S to the end of the verb. You can see that here in this example. Traffic snarls up on this road every morning just before 8 a.m. Here, our subject traffic sometimes is confusing for students that I work with. They'll say, I'm picturing many cars, right? And that makes sense. However, this noun is singular, so it's like it. That's why you see the S on the end of the verb. That's important for subject-verb agreement. Now let's move on and make a negative sentence in the simple present. To do this, again, we pay attention to our subject. If the subject is I, you, we, or they, we'll use do not and then the base verb. But if the subject is he, she, or it, we'll use does not and then the base verb. Notice I'm not adding an S to the end of the verb here. Here's another example. These managers don't snarl at their employees. So here we're discussing the lack of a habit, which would make for a much better working environment, I think. Now, let's look at making a yes or no question in the simple present. To do this, start with do or does, whichever form matches your subject. That subject comes next. Then use the base verb. Again, I'm not adding an S to the end of the verb in my yes or no questions. The only time I'm doing that is in the affirmative when my subject is he, she, or it. Here's our last example. Does that character snarl at everyone he meets? This might be a verb we see used more commonly in literature because it paints another sort of clear picture of how someone is behaving or how they're speaking to another individual. Now, let's spend a moment looking at some words related to our verb snarl. And the first word we'll discuss is just the noun form of this word. The noun snarl has the exact same spelling and the exact same pronunciation as our verb. When we use this word as a noun, we're referring to an act or a sound of snarling. An example of that might be, this dog's snarl is very intimidating. But we could also be referring to a tangle of hairs or thread. So, an example of that. The wind made such a snarl of my hair today. It's been really windy where I live. And so that was an easy example to think of because I walk just a few feet and you would think I haven't seen a comb in weeks. One last word for us today. It's the adjective snarly. This adjective could be used in a couple different ways. One is to describe someone or something that is angered or bad-tempered. An example of this, I can't stand working with snarly people. But a second way you might encounter this adjective refers to or describes someone or something that is tending to or likely to snarl. So, an example of that. The snarly text messages show how the feud simmered before and after the election. So here, maybe we have people disagreeing about what occurred or what was said, what was communicated, and they're, again, sharing rather ill-tempered, angry messages. And so that's what's being described in that particular sentence. Again, I want to say a special thanks to Artem and thanks to everyone who's patiently awaited a new video as I've recovered from a rather unpleasant cold. I'm so grateful for you all watching. I really appreciate these suggestions. Please keep them coming. I hope to see you soon. Have a great day.